We're here today because of the spring cedars, and unlike the fall cedars where you have that all winter, and the same with the berries. If you think of all of our native berries, including, like we have this is choke cherry here. So again, the flowers were probably out last week, but you can see they're starting to close over now. So a lot of these would have already been pollinated. But the thing with the berries is what happens to berries after they're ripe. Well, and a lot of times they're eaten. So they're eaten by, mammals, birds, and that's because a lot of berries need to go through an actual gut of an animal. And you think of the cherries, the pits, how hard they are. So they actually need to be, it's called scarified, and you can scarify through acid. Or for us in the lab, we don't use acids, but we use things like rock tumblers or sandpaper or something, because if you don't do that, the actual seed can't break out, like the embryo inside. So that's why it's just sort of all adaptations. So almost all the other seed after these spring cedars, they need something to germinate. So when you collect them, if they sit in the back of your truck for a couple of weeks, it's no big deal. They're fermenting. That's all. That's great. If they sit in your office in a bag over the winter for 2 or 3 months, not a big deal because it's dry. Our humidity is dropping. They're actually drying out. That's not a problem. But with the spring cedars, so here we have, this is Bebb's willow. So Bebb's willow is actually the first of the willows in the Atlantic Canada that come in. And this would be a perfect example of what we're looking for. The catkins are just starting to break open. So that means that it's ready to be collected. This one here, it's the same Bebb's, but you can see a lot darker green and they haven't started to open. So this one, the seed isn't ripe yet. If you collect it from this one here, you might get some germination, but actually you might get really good germination the first year, but the seed doesn't store, because the last thing seed inherit from the parent tree is longevity and the ability to store. And that's sort of the stuff that we work on at the Seed Center. Is like, so what happens if we collect the seed from this compared to the seed from this? And that's one thing we'll see, that next year, you might get 100% germination from both, but 5 years down the road, you're still getting 100% germination from this, and this stuff it's garbage. It's 0%. So the other species, again, at this time of the year that's also ready is going to be your red maple. So red maple, and in New Brunswick we have silver maple. And then elm is another species that's ready. It's another spring cedar. And then your populus. So unfortunately, and again, it's not a great populus seed year. And again, almost all trees come into seed periodically. So again, populus actually, it's every 2 to 3 years. This is just not a good year, but I know last year, 2017, 2019 were both great years. 2020, 2021, I don't know, because we were stuck in our office like everybody else, wishing we were out. But this year isn't, but that means next year probably is going to be a really good populus year. So this is, and the other thing is, like our willows, I talked about how Bebb's willow, it's the first one that comes in. What was the Pussy willow is next, but all the willows, it's almost like, this week Bebb's are ready, and maybe for 10 days, and soon as it's done, another species is going to be ready. And they do that because a lot of these species will hybridize. If they were all releasing pollen at the same time, they would hybridize, and the hybrids don't seem to survive very well. So it's just another adapted characteristic by our trees. And the same with our populus. So you can already see this is trembling aspen, Populus tremuloides. The leaves are fully out. So if this was in seed, the catkins are already going to be out and ready. Whereas for large tooth aspen, you can see the leaves are less developed. They're just coming out now. So the seed from that are about 2 weeks after Populus tremuloides. And then after that, balsam poplar. That's the third. We didn't see any balsam poplar. I'm not sure if there is any in this part of the province. Yeah. So the balsam poplar, you can really see the difference because the bark on the tree, it's almost like a bronze brown. And again, at this time of the year, they're easy to see because the leaves are still in the buds. They haven't popped out yet. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yes.
So for poplars, is it the same as you were speaking with the willow, like looking at the catkins and when they kind of look like they're starting to open and they're out of that just pure green stage? Is that where you're trying to get them?
Yeah. And that's why we can do this sort of training looking at just willows, because it's almost the exact same. When you're looking at your populace up with your binoculars, as soon as you start to see the white fluff, that's the time to get it.
Some out Nunamuggy, I know for sure, because I've been looking at them.
Yeah, that's great.
Exciting,
Yeah. So the other thing, when we talked about the differences between the spring cedars, so again, I mean, here we are May 30th. May 30th. If you think 6 weeks ago, what was going on with our forest? There was hardly anything. So these flowers developed, they were pollinated, and they're ready in 4 to 5 weeks. Really quick. As soon as these open up, and they're already opening up, as soon as that seed hits the ground, if there's any moisture at all, germination happens immediately. And if moisture isn't available, the seed just dies. And that's why an average trembling aspen or large tooth or balsam poplar tree in its lifetime produces about 1 trillion seed. It's actually about 1.5 trillion seed. And how many seedlings actually grow from that 1.5 trillion seed? Maybe 1 or 2 survive. But that's its mechanism. So, but for us, if we can make these collections, so this is ripe and ready now, if we left this in our truck for 24, 48 hours, just like this, that seed is dead because it's ready to go. It wants to germinate right now. So that means when we make our collections from all of these species, the willows, the populus, and the red maple, the silver maple, and the elm, as soon as you make the collection, you have to start thinking dry down and get it ready for storage. Otherwise, it's dead because, again, it wants to germinate right now. So if you look in a lot of the literature, it'll tell you, oh, you can't collect any of these species because people would treat them the same as the fall collections. They'd collect them, they'd put them in their office for a while, and then, oh, it's all dead, so it can't be collected. But we can. The other nice thing is one catkin like this. So anyone want to take a guess of how many seed are actually in that?
50.
I'm going to say more.
200.
Let's go more.
Wow, like 500?
Let's go more.
1,000?
1,000. There's about, so in all of our stuff, and again, and this is stuff because people weren't collecting populus because they didn't think you could do. So if you went to buy populus, most of the populus you're buying are actually taken from stem and root sprouts, and it's grafted material, it sprouts. But for actual seed, most people didn't collect it. But the nice thing is that like one catkin, on average, you're going to get about 1,000 viable seed out of this one little catkin. So the nice thing knowing that is that you can go out, and we use 3-liter pails, but 1 3-liter pail like that, full of catkins, you're probably looking at about 300,000 seed. So you really don't have to collect a whole lot to get where you need to get. But that's the other nice thing, because timing is such an issue when you're out there. We would suggest, if you're collecting, collect as much as you can and then get it stored, and that way you don't have to worry for the next 10, 15, 20 years about ever collecting that again, because you already have enough for all your needs. Yeah. Yeah. The other quick one, so with the maples, and these seed here, we can sort of pass this around. With your maples, these are still developing. So we're still, and again, they're fairly small if you look at them. And they're kind of a nice red color. They're going to tell you they're ready when they start turning brown, and especially the stalk. So we'll call this a stalk that's holding the two. So this is the samara and the seed. And they're double samara, and all your maples are double samara, meaning there's 2 seeds attached. And the samara is actually the wing, and then you have the seed. But when these are ripe, the stalk will start turning brown, and the samaras will turn brown. And as soon as that happens, you've got to collect. We've been trying to make good maple collections in Nova Scotia for years, but at this time of the year, we always seem to get a weather event, like a hurricane or big gale force wind. So we'll be down like on a Friday going, yeah, okay, we got to get back Monday because they're going to be ready. And then a weekend storm will blow in and we'll come back and they're gone. So that's another thing with seed collecting, especially the spring cedars, that if you're going to be invested in it, then you have to be prepared to work with the biology of the species, which means that sometimes you're going to have to go out on the weekends to make those big collections. Yeah. And the other thing just to keep in mind, and again, we have handouts and stuff that we'll send to everyone, but for some reason with all of the maples, there are 2 samara, 2 seed, only 1 is going to be full. And that's just the way it is. I do not know why that happens. It shouldn't with pollen flow, but it is. So when you're making your collections, you have to understand that if you fill a bucket with seed, cut it in half mentally right off the bat. I only have half that amount of seed.
Is that more red maples?
You can, but again, for the collection purpose, error on the side of, okay, 50% collections to double up. Yeah. The other thing we talk about a lot with our seed collecting, and again, you can see a nice red maple right down here. You can see the seed on it. And again, there's another, again, even if you just look through the canopy, you're going to see, you know, trees here and there. I mean, this is a really good red maple year. When you're out, sometimes people make mistakes too, because our maples, almost all of our trees are male and female. So they'll be going along going, oh, I see one tree here and one tree there. Is it a good seed year or not? Because that one and that one aren't in seed. Well, more than likely, that one and that one produce the pollen. So they would never have seed. They were the male trees. And a lot of times people find that. And sometimes you'll find whole stands of male dominated and then other stands of female dominated trees. Yeah. Any questions? I've been going hard here.
How do you store the willow seed? Is it different?
Yeah, so the willow, so all of them, it's about getting them dried down quickly. So that's one of the issues we have. If you look at our map of where all of our poplars and willow seed collections are, we have New Brunswick covered well, we've got Quebec covered well, but the only reason we have Quebec covered well is because we have a federal office there. We've actually gone twice. We take our whole lab to Quebec, set it up. So when people are making their collections, because we have to get that seed. So this willow seed here, if you were to make collections, so we're going to make some collections today. By the end of the day tomorrow, this needs to be in a place where it's drying down. So we brought some of our Gamma Seal lid stuff, Kieran. Yeah. So one of the things we've been, do you have the lids back there, Lindsay, or what's there? So we contacted Kew Gardens. That's the big seed center, the Millennium Seed Center in England. And they're responsible for basically world biodiversity. We actually send stuff to them, like some of our high valued stuff. We haven't sent any of our ash yet, but eventually if we get good bumper crop years, we will probably send a small percentage there. It's always great to have a backup for your collections, right? Just in case something goes wrong. But we were wondering, well, how do they get seed shipped from South America, from Africa, from all over the world to them? And what they have is they have huge containers, like on the container ships, and they have them completely sealed in, and then they use desiccant. So this desiccant here, it's much the same as you get with your phone or when you buy with batteries, just those little packs that keep everything dry. It absorbs moisture. So they would basically line these container ships with desiccant, put the seed in, then ship it to England. But as long as the desiccant's in there, things are drying down. So one of the things we've been working on is using this on a smaller scale. So this is a special lid that can be fit on almost any, these, I don't know what you call these. They're painters buckets. I mean, we use them all the time, but you can buy these, you can get them in many sizes up to, I think, 25 liters, and that lid will fit on them. And as long as you're putting in, so again, if I have 2 kilograms of seed I'm putting in, as long as you put in 2 kilograms of desiccant, and then you can ship it to us, that'll start drawing the seed. And if you can't put 2 kilograms of desiccant in, that's fine. But as long as there's a good amount of desiccant, it'll at least start that drying process. And as long as things are drying down, it's on the way to storage.
What do you do when you lab those? So say you collect and then you're back at the seed center. How do you dry it?
So in our lab, we have a bunch of drying racks. So they almost like have screening, very fine screening on the bottom. We lay out all the catkins. So the catkins come, so first of all, if I was picking this, all these catkins come off. Because again, this wood has moisture in it. So these catkins now go into a paper bag. And again, what we'll be doing down here is the paper bag will go into a bucket with desiccant. The one thing you have to be careful of is not packing, because when these all open up, everybody knows what it's like when these catkins open up. I mean, it just puffs up. You've got fluff all over the place. So you got to make sure you don't pack things in. But as soon as you get back to the lab, we have a big room where we have it's humidity controlled with dehumidifiers. So it's hooked up right into the system. So the room is at about 25% humidity, and that's enough to keep drying things down.
Spread them out on drying racks.
We spread them out on drying racks, and then we actually have to cover, for this species, we have to cover the drying racks up, because every time you open the door, any little puff and it's just seed everywhere, and we want to make sure we keep all our individual seed lots separate. And then once it's all puffed up, we put them into a tumbler and we blow air on it, and as it tumbles, so soon as the seed is ripe, so again, if I pull open some, like again, as I said, there's over 1,000 seed in this, but the seed is all stuck into the white fluff, we'll call it.
Go around and show us the seed.
Well, I can pass these around. The seed, you're actually probably going to need a microscope or a magnisign. They're the size of little tiny peppers. Actually, it's not that bad. They're a little bigger. That's the seed. See the little green?
That thing?
That's the seed there. What? And in each of these here, yeah. So if you pull these apart, you can actually see, and that's the other thing, when these are ripe, the seed itself is going to turn brown. But right now, if you pull apart a little bit, you'll see, if you just pull apart some of it, you're actually going to tiny little green specks in it, and those are the
little sack here.
So even the white fluff that you see here, just pull some of that in your fingers.
Okay.
Just pull it right out, grab a bunch of it, and you're going to actually, somewhere in there, you're going to see little tiny green. That's the seed buried in there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's small. I mean, smaller than like a grain of pepper. No, that's fine.
You need to read the forestry office.
Yeah. So just for, and especially Elizabeth and Anthony thinking about this, one of the things we've been doing, because of the 2 billion tree program, and like I said, that all of our provinces, all they grow is conifers, like Strathloran, conifers, that's all they grow. So we've actually been sending Sean a variety of other species just so he can see what the seed looks like, because this seed will not go through their current equipment, like their seeders.
How long do they last in storage?
So we have seed, so Charlotte, that's a really good question. So I went to a conference in 2017 in Edmonton, and the first presenter was from the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology, and he had a slide, and it said, populous seed, we have it stored for 8 years at 80%. It started at 100, and after 8 years, it was at 80% or something like that. But then it dropped right off. And then the next woman got up, and she was from the Seed Center in Alberta, and she got up, and her slide had her data, and she says, oh, well, we do this a little bit differently. We make sure, and so she was saying within 7 days of collecting off a tree, we have it all stored, and we're actually getting like 12 to 15 years. Well, I felt really bad because I already had a slide. You can't change your slide, but ours was like, we try to get within 48 hours We try to have our seed in the lab drying down and completely processed within 4 days. And we have seed from 25 years that is still, so that's the importance. You can make,
I think humidity plays a good part because
it certainly
in
does.
In Alberta, they don't have the water we do.
Right, but that actually works against us. So if we waited 7 days before we processed our seed, we know we get 0%. So if we followed their recommended, we'd get 0% because there, humidity isn't an issue. It certainly is here. Yeah, yeah. So if you guys actually processed even quicker, your seed would last, you know, for a lifetime. Yeah, yeah.
Donnie, can we find out where you order the lids and that desiccant from? Because I'm just thinking if we're gonna go do.
We have all that. So again, part of our knowledge mobilization, there's Kieran. So we basically, we can, yeah, and we might, yeah. If we haven't sent you already.
We have a whole list of all the equipment that we use with prices, brands, and where to find it.
Yeah, so everything's hyperlinked, so you don't have to do anything. Again, one of the things we do say, we encourage, because again, we're kind of working across the country, we encourage people, look at what it is, and if you can buy it local, buy local, but if not, hit the hyperlink. Unfortunately, a lot of our stuff we end up getting from Amazon because it's the quickest, fastest, and you don't know. I mean, we know in Fredericton where we can get it, but on the list, you're going to see a couple of different links for things. Well, you know, this is where we get it, but if not, click here and you can get it. So we have all that stuff done. It's all priced out. Yeah, so everything you see here is on that list. Everything in our lab too, like all of our equipment, and it's broken down. Like this is the field gear you need, and this is the lab stuff if you want to get to this stage, and if you want to get it to the next stage, then this is where you can go. Yeah.
Are you guys going to coordinate like pickup locations to make it quicker in different spots in the province, or is it going to be like shipped out?
Yeah, so we're hoping for shipping because the problem with coordinating, so if you're making collections, and that's something that's part of the funding with 2 billion trees, that's another, I mean, 25,000 sounds like, oh, it's a good, but again, when you start thinking of gas to collect and then shipping as well, like again, a bucket like this full of, again, and I would suggest it'll probably be bigger buckets that you want to use so you can put, you know, multiple collections in a bucket. You know, shipping pure later, because waiting for coordination, again, every day counts. And yeah, and again, the populace, for starting off, it's going to be the most challenging. These spring cedars, they are. But again, red maple is one. I think there's a real need. There's a call for it already. I know that Sean Gillis we've already sent him 5,000-10,000 seed to work with because he's interested in. But our issue is that our red maple, sugar maple, a lot of our maple seed has been in high demand, and we just don't have a whole lot left to give out. Yeah. Because our collections were never made for reforestation. They were made for conservation and research. Yeah. Yeah.
Are the red maples just as sensitive for that process? Like they'd have to go in the same.
They're a little, and again, when you think of the size of that seed, the seed coat is very small on the willow and poplar, so they are more susceptible to moisture, changes in moisture. The red maple, we probably have a little more leeway, but in general, like within a week, we need it after collection. Again, it all depends. And again, Anthony, if you have the capability of making collections and getting them somewhere, even with a dehumidifier in a room and opening the bags and, you know, at the end of every day, shaking the bags so they're not heating up, because it's like compost, like a compost pile heats up. Well, a bag of seed, it's alive. You know, it's not dead, all that seed, so it generates heat. And if it gets too warm, it's going to start dying. But as long as you have that capability of starting to dry it down, then there's a little more leeway there, for sure. Yeah.
Where do moose maple and mountain maple fit? Like, do they act more like red maple or more like sugar? Because they're kind of in between.
Yeah, so really it's silver maple and red maple are the only two eastern maples that are spring. So all the other maple you're seeing out there, your striped, your moose maple, your sugar maple, that seed's not going to be ready until the fall. So we're good with that. Yeah. Yeah. But one of the main things, again, with the program is labeling. So the other thing that we'll be providing is these are the labels we use. These could change. This is what we use, and each province has their own labeling system. So we're probably going to have to come up with a generic label. And I know we can pass these around here just so you can see the information. It's not, we don't need that much information, but it's sort of, this gives us enough that we can, if you write this stuff on, so we need the date, and the date that the collection made is really important, because when a seed, if we get a populus or a willow collection and the date was, you know, May 1st, and it shows up in a bag, well, we know, well, first of all, it came from an area May 1st, it wasn't ripe. Like, no matter what, it just wasn't ripe and ready. It didn't have time. But say it was May 30th, and then we didn't get it to June 30th, already it's red flags for us. So we don't put all this energy into it. It's like, well, where was this? And that would be a call to the person's name. That's why collect it by. Say, hey, you made that collection on May 30th. What happened in the last month? And maybe they say, oh, well, we collected it. We actually took it into a humidity controlled room. We dried it down. Now we're sending it to you. Perfect. But if someone says, well, I collected it and it was in the back of my truck for the last month and I just found it, thought I'd send it along, it's like, we're probably not going to waste our time on it. The species is very important. And one of the things in our bag is that we carry these little envelopes, but these are they're not stamp envelopes. There's a special name for them. It doesn't really matter. But what we ask for is when you're sending us your collection, so the seed goes in the bag, the tag with the information goes in the bag. On the outside of the bag, you at least put down the date and the species and rewrite the longitude and latitude. And then you take a leaf or a twig from whatever you collected and put it in this. That way we can kind of verify, you know, sometimes we get stuff sent to us and there's no species on it, but as long as we have a voucher sample with the leaves and the twigs and we have the seed, we can usually figure it out. And the location, you know, we can usually figure out what it is. But without this voucher sample, it's really difficult, and we can't store something if we don't know where it is, or if it's misidentified. I mean, all of our stuff is for conservation and research. You know, we wouldn't want to be storing white ash labeled black ash, and 10 years down the road, Anthony's asking for black ash seed, and I send him a bunch of white ash. That wouldn't look very good. So that part is really important. The other thing we keep in our bags, again, for this time of the year, again, we have binoculars usually. Cut tests we do on almost all of our seed, but it's really difficult for willows and populus. Again, if you're getting good growth and it looks like this here, that seed, it's usually pretty good. It's just I guess with pollen flow at this time of the year, there's not a lot of competition, and we talked about how they come in to seed one at a time, so you don't get a whole lot of cross-contamination. If they all seeded or pollen was at the same time, that's where you're going to get like a large percentage isn't any good because it was pollinated by the wrong pollen, the flower, so it wouldn't develop. With the maples though, and again, I'm not just cutting board. When these are nice and big, all I would do is, and again, we can hand some of these around, but if you break these open, actually we're kind of running out here. There are a couple of seed for everybody. But when you break open the two Samaras, you got one there, and I'll pull one off here. You should be able to see inside some really nice white embryonic material. Again, these are fairly small. Like in another week's time, another 2 weeks, these are going to be 3 times that size, and it'll be really easy to tell if they're full or not. I'll give you the 3, and you can. Yeah. But Yeah, so just break open that seed, and you can see, or you can almost squeeze it. And again, like this one here, I'm trying to see if I can find an empty one. Here you go, Lindsay.
Johnny, I only collect full seeds. So.
You only collect full seed? Yeah. Good. Like this one here, you can definitely see there's nice white inside there up here. Again, it's pretty small this time, whereas that one looks like it's empty.
Well, I think I squeezed
Oh, you squeeze it out?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if this is empty or not.
That one looks empty. Like I don't see any. And so the other one
This one.
might have a full seed in it.
Okay.
Yeah. But again, if you're out collecting and you notice that, you know, you've been pulling them apart and they're all empty, that means it just didn't get pollinated, that particular tree, and it's time to move on to the next. Yeah. Yeah. Good.